We are now moving into the state of AI ethics and people of color. It's going to be moderated by Chibu, and we've got Joshua Armah and Anton Alexander on this panel. Once again, we are definitely really excited. Bridget.io and Noetic Nomads having brought together this event with a bunch of partners sponsored by the Forward Funds. And we encourage you all to participate in the challenge aspect. Come up with a concept in your area of expertise or interest or endeavor and explore what could happen if you had access to a hyperdimensional web. So once again, thanks to everyone. I'm going to hand it over to Chibu. It's all yours.
Hey everyone. So I guess I should first say make sure you're in the right room. This is again the state of AI ethics and POC on the web. If you're looking for the state of sense making on the web, then you can head over to the B Zoom room. Um, Aside from that, I guess we can just get started since we started a little late here. What do we want to talk about first?
Well, I think it'd be great for you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're up to, and then have the other panelists do the same.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Chibu. I my background is in economics and computer science. I did my undergrad at Caltech, and since then I've been really interested in data analytics and predictive analytics and data science, especially as it applies to social impact and sort of the social good. Worked at a company called Bird for a few years. Recently, I was a data scientist there, and they are an electric scooter company. So they're, really interested in, solving the fossil fuel problem as well as the last mile problem and sort of that sustainable urban mobility space. And I was doing a lot of work around demand forecasting, figuring out where we should place the vehicles and when. And I also got to do some work around equity zones and proving out the business case for placing birds in disadvantaged communities, which we can talk a bit about more later. But over that time, before that, during that, and after that, I've was working on this project that I call Area, and it's basically trying to put humans back into the loop of AI when it comes to music discovery. So this is going to be AI that is understandable and interpretable by any person by using an immersive display of the data, essentially to orient and help understand the connections between music and the the way that styles have trended over time, and essentially bringing a new dimension to sort of the appreciation of art through data. Super excited about that project, and especially when it comes to ethics and POC in AI, um, sort of combating the way that recommendation systems are set up today and making them more transparent, making them fairer, and making them more human, understandable, and meaningful. So people can kind of both reckon with the Black contributions to art over space and time, as well as um, have more agency in the content that they're exposed to or that they get to explore. So that's kind of what I've been working on recently. I work on that under the umbrella of Future Modern, which is a co-op network that I founded. Basically, a new kind of media tech startup that's owned by its workers and led by artists, looking to let's sort of unlock the economic potential of undervalued communities by independently backing their ideas for a better world, so they don't have to sell out to the powers that potentially shouldn't be. Um, and so Area is one of the projects under Future Modern. We have some other projects in the pipeline as well, but that is the main sort of data and AI initiative. Yeah, so that's kind of what I work on. And should we introduce the others in the panel now?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I can't see who else is here.
So right now,
Oh, okay. So
Joshua, why don't you come up and
okay, I see it now.
Okay,
So
sorry. I mean, it'd be great if we all have our videos turned on, but that's just another thing. So I'm Joshua Armah. Basically, I am the chief data scientist at Wiyasay Research Institute. My focus has been on systems engineering and data science for the past decade. I have been a founder 3 times with one exit, and I'm based in the Bay Area. My focus with Wiase Research is applying smart cities to urban communities. What we do is build tech-enabled solutions for medium to small nonprofits, governments, and corporations that are in need of digital transformation. And an example I did of this is being able to take, let's say, an Airbnb like app, and instead of using it for short-term vacation stays, using it to find permanent housing for homeless veterans. Okay, we seek to create verticals to help niche nonprofits and others, leverage data science and then rely on their own data source, because a lot of people rely on third-party data sources, and then all the stuff that's happening around that affects not only data collection, but also the application of being able to utilize that data with training neural networks or applying it to machine learning. And most of my work in that space, in the AI space, is actually focused on cognitive systems, being able to create, things that help people work smarter, better, and faster, versus trying to replace people with half-baked models. So that's a quick synopsis on me.
cool. Thanks for that. Let's move on to Anton. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, what's up, guys? My name's Anton Alexander. I'm a senior machine learning and artificial intelligence engineer at BlueRidge.ai. I work from one of the former leads at the NSA for artificial intelligence. I design hardware, IoT sensors, and I design like artificial intelligence systems and infrastructures for IoT devices. And I also do artificial intelligence in like industrial settings using computer vision to find defects and things in products. We usually serve like billion-dollar companies. We integrate into their PLCs systems, which is like factory automation systems. Allen Bradley, Schneider, Modicon. They're huge companies. Typically, the internet, there's a .10 network in factories. They use a .20 network to communicate and automate tasks. We use artificial intelligence to basically do the work of QA people. I went to Maryland. I started off as a double E. I started my own business while I was in college. I started collecting. I have one of the largest urban databases in the Mid Atlantic. I was doing concerts. I was like a one-man wrecking shop. I've done a lot of high-profile events. I'm actually suing Tekashi 69 for 5.4 million. It's on Complex, New York Times, and other things. That business started for me, using data, using AI to run my promotional business. Allowed me to create jobs, hire a lot of people, things like that. During COVID, obviously that's not happening anymore. I'm working on a live streaming event currently with Cardi B and NBA YoungBoy. And yeah, that's it. Just I have a degree in computer science and mathematics.
Thanks, Anton. Um, yeah, so those are really interesting backgrounds. I'd love to sort of go deeper into how you feel the ethics of that have uh, you how you dealt with the ethics of that. What sort of ethical dilemmas you felt you faced in those experiences. Because you mentioned that you sort of do the job of or something that you worked on sort of does the job of QA people. But then it was also mentioned that you want to work on AI that sort of augments people's productivity as opposed to replacing them with a model that um, may be sort of overkill. So yeah, I would just love to either of you to dive deeper into kind of just generally how you see ethics in AI and specifically sort of in your work experience.
Yeah, so I actually design systems that might replace humans. And it's something I battle with. I think about it. I talk to the companies, I work with the automation engineers, I see the CFOs, I see how the presentations go. And it's basically a dollar thing to them. Like they value, um, you know, what's the cost of labor versus the AI system? What's the cost of the AI system, right? And like, you see the people that might potentially lose jobs or be like displaced with AI. And like you know it's like, first, if you do feel something and you feel passionately about it, what can you do? Do you just quit your job, right? And then like what does a good medium look like, right? And we spoke about that, me and my boss spoke about that. And one of the things in the company that we're working with, like what do they do, right? So and what's the real problem, because a lot of people talk about it but they've never designed these systems, like for billion-dollar companies, right? Where they have a 24-hour crew in a factory doing Q&A on a product, making sure that they don't get yard returns from Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, right? And they're pushing out $1 million in product a day, like Caterpillar tires, for example, those $100,000 tires, like, or Nucor steel that make the bolts that go on our bridges, right? If those bolts are defected, or like a plane stud for an airplane, like, do we want to be more efficient in that, right? Like you got to kind of like think about those things, right? So and like, what does the system actually look like versus what do people talk about it in, like when they talk about people losing their jobs? Well, the one thing is that the retraining part of it, right? So you have false positives, and in these systems, as an artificial intelligence engineer, my job is to reduce the false positives and false negatives in that thing, right? And that requires human interaction. And then as new products come, let's say like somebody was designing like a deck board, for instance, right? And a new color comes. How do you train it to with these new defects and things like that, right? So like, humans are part of the thing, but it's a new job and a new position that's going to arise with these AI systems. Instead of it being a QA person doing manual inspection of a problem, I think it's going to be somebody that's checking a computer. And like, do we? I honestly think that these jobs are going to happen. Like, they're not going, like, nothing we can do to can stop it, because the economy, the economics of it makes sense, right? So like what do we do? You know what I'm saying? Like, and do we instead say, hey, let's prepare our people, let's create training programs for this, let's educate people on AI, let's try to get them familiar with labeling and other tasks other than being an artificial intelligence engineer, being a data labeler, understanding how to install an embedded system, like in machines, in these big AI systems, they're not using webcams, they're using machine vision cameras, right? POE cameras. Do we accelerate that those programs, like installing these industrial solutions and training people, so that's my thought on specifically what I do. And those are the things that I battle with, or like I see that go on. And I think that's like that's the conversation that we have and the problems that we do have in these environments. So that's my take on industrial AI. Now we could talk about other AI stuff, but that's industrial.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share a little bit with that, or move to
Yeah,
the next time?
definitely.
Okay.
Especially in regards to sort of the difference between what Anton was talking about in terms of industrial AI and sort of automation, and more what you're talking about with smart cities, which is sort of maybe another area of AI that is more inherently trying to work with humans, but also just whatever your response would be to that, or just your feelings on that.
Sure. So just to paraphrase, I believe that a lot of AI is sensationalized, to be frank. So a lot of the real core value of this, let's just take one thing. Like Chibu and Anton, y'all both have backgrounds in mathematics. We all know in mathematics, when you use mathematical notation, it's actually Greek letters. Okay. There's a huge problem with ethics in terms of interpreting what we're talking about when it comes to communities that are being affected by learning curves. And for me, I spent more of my time looking at behavioral science. And when I look at AI, for me, or at least machine learning, is more about how do we create NLP systems to create the ability to communicate value. So in terms of like just being able to work with, for instance, let's say like a nonprofit that's working with COVID right now, and they're dealing with a lot of like medical facilities, and they may be doing like homeless food kits and trying to get people resources because the local welfare office is oversubscribed. How do you give them tech-enabled solutions to get problem solved? That's where a lot of my work is centered around. And I believe that most of the work in smart cities is actually being spent on machines and not people. So when you look at in behavioral science, the real problem a lot of us have actually been investing in is the attention economy, and in creating people that are essentially spoiled and rely on the on-demand options like Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Instacart. Their whole life is in the app, right? They can get anything instantly. Now with challenges, how do you create resiliency? So with resiliency is how do we build tools and other ethics that will be able to help bring some of the legacy internet into the spatial web. So without getting too technical, I think just for like some of the audience that may not even understand some of these topics, the bigger, broader concept in the background around smart cities is how do we make technology for people to become smarter versus stupider? Because really the bigger problem is we've oversimplified the world, and now people don't know what to do. So we have the average human attention span is like 7 to 8 seconds. And you know how much a goldfish attention span is 9 seconds. And at the same time, we're producing over 2 million pounds of carbon per second in the air. So how does all this correlate? This all correlates because in urban communities like LA, for example, they have a smog problem. If you have respiratory issues in LA, you already been dealing with smog, not let alone diabetes and let alone other issues. So how do we bring things into the Black community or Black and brown community that can transform it without it becoming a problem? So that's where I think data interpretation is probably the best way to look at it. And then it's just essentially upskilling people through open source. That way they're not really learning about AI. They're not learning about the tools. Like you don't wake up and say, I want to learn about electricity. You say, hey, I want to learn how to make a light bulb. Or I want to learn how to create a lamp, right? It's the end product that Anton works on, I think is helpful because people being able to work on hardware and other types of end products that are real world use cases can bring together the thinking that's required, which really obviously has been based on discrete mathematics. And on the flip side, as we go into quantum, all the stuff we learned is going to be thrown in the trash. A lot of the binary systems that we all learned on, all the legacy systems that are built in today's world are going to be trashed and to some degree held on to because corporations will want to, they'll fight against it. So in communities, that's the area that really applies. So for me, like I have a background on the African side from Ghana. And in Africa, they've never experienced landline technology. They've only experienced wireless. They they are the biggest use case of applying smart cities right now in the world. Not only because they have a lot of wireless technology, but because they rely on it in peso, which is a mobile payment system through their cell phones. So when you look at being able to bring technology and resources to a place that you can innovate, Africa is being used as a sandbox. In America, we're fighting a battle between corporate interests and community interests. And that's where there has to become a medium that seek to bring research that is used and collaborate with others like yourselves to create dialogue and discussion to combat confusion, because a lot of the ethics is like in Ring. And this is the last thing I mentioned. When Ring got acquired, one of the biggest problems that people had with them giving police agencies access to the surveillance cameras was that they didn't necessarily train the computer vision on what Black and brown people look like. So if Ring sees a person trying to rob a house, it can misidentify the characteristics of the racial individual that's doing it. So that's another issue that I have. Some of the ethics in AI is really around that, is in the kind of models we're using. There's no cultural characteristic or attribution modeling being done to like create annotations or labeling to support the deep learning. A lot of people's AI is actually just a black box. They scale up a deep learning algorithm and create a black box algorithm that supports a use case, but then they can't explain it afterwards. So that's kind of like what I would like to close with, and just say that, I would love to make sure that we start with the community and then see how we can bring real world end products to the world that can help core quality of life issues.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
So you said you worked for the Bird Scooter company?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so you must be familiar with these devices right here, right? The feather and the particle. They use these in the Bird Scooter to actually track them. Um, that's the technology that they use, and I actually developed those. I actually, I build a product with this, and I reduce it to PCB. I think that these types of technologies and these like cortex chips and these like microprocessors can be used to help out our community. Like me actually working and developing these things, like simple things like FRAM and MPU 6050 and like watchdog timers, and like now TensorFlow and Google released something called a TPU, right? And they released a version of the TPU that can be integrated onto these chips now, right? And Adafruit has a TensorFlow Lite capability, and they also have open source and the ability to train these models. I encountered that problem with the bias in the models with like me being black. It would sometimes say I'm a dog and stuff, but I was able to fix it, right? So like we talk about the problem, but like sometimes like even if it sees a dog, it could actually mistake a dog as like a cow too, right? So like how do we benchmark and score these things? Like first, how do we like empirically define like the accuracy and things like that? Well, we have MAP, we have recall, we have all these things, right? So like one, when people talk about that thing, that bias thing, when we talk about it, I like to first talk about what are the metrics we're using to analyze them. What is the test? What kind of like confusion matrix results, F1 classification reports can I see? Also, what solutions are present for that, right? And they're working on solutions like NVIDIA, the ADA, adaptive discriminator, and then like GANs and things like that. So there's a couple solutions that exist for like biased data sets that we can employ, and like as much as like we're on Clubhouse, we hear the talks all the time. We're in the chat. I'm in the AI chat. Literally, like 45% or 50% is ethics and bias and da 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 da. But it's like 5% is solutions, right? It's like what policies can we put in? What can we do? And like with me being a math guy, I think like, hey, what can I do as a brown guy who's in this community, who's witnessed this, like who's seen this, right? Who's using AI every day. I practice AI every day. I use computer vision. I do these things. What can I do to help this problem, right? And with the smart cities things, it's like if we can start building our own models, as the people in the community and start deploying them on embedded chips that are not connected to the internet, right? That are on the device itself. What about, okay, you're in LA, there's smog in the air, right? Is there an AI system on a chip like this that the Bird scooter uses with TensorFlow light chip that I can put to help solve that problem or help give people more information? Is there an oxygen sample thing I can do where somebody breathes in and the AI tells them? Is there a blood test I can do where somebody's blood goes and they can have in-home medical using this technology? So like, you know, my brain as a maker and as somebody that designs hardware as well goes to that. Like, I think that we have technology right now that we can use to help this problem, just like analog devices and Berkeley and all these guys are using them to go help fight forest fires in the woods or help save nature. With these same chips, these feather chips and these particle chips, can we use them to help these communities that are disproportionately affected by artificial intelligence, right? Just like the guys like Steve, the Wiases and the Jobs and these guys, like, you know, were innovators. Can we as technologists and makers, you know, open source and crowdsource these models to help these communities and help build tools where people don't have access to healthcare? Like Google had a model that they had, a TF light model that they scanned diseased plants in Africa to see what they could do to help save the vegetation. So, you know, that's my thought in terms of like using technology to help the communities that are affected by ethics or bias. What solutions and what tools right now can we use to help these people, right? My people essentially, and some of y'all, right? What can we do to help them?
And real quick, just to throw something out there, because he said something very tangible with this, and the solution or an approach here also becomes the problem with a lot of engineers, including, you know, me in the past when I was working in startups as a CTO or helping people rate, you know, do the venture. A lot of the problem I realized is that there's actually no African American open source foundations. So one of the things I actually did was I launched the Wiyasay Foundation, which is a minority-led foundation for open source AI models. And we're focused on exactly what he's talking about. An actual example of this is right now we have a pilot with Carson, California for food shortage, where we're essentially using community gardens to source locally and grow locally with local schools. Like Crenshaw has a farmer's market and it's grown by the high school students at Crenshaw. Okay, how do we give them IoT sensors to learn about measuring plant data, and then on the flip side, build the solution for the community that is a systemic real problem, like procurement? Because the bigger problem is 90% of the IP you create as an engineer scientist is not owned by you. Majority of it probably won't be owned by you. And then the bigger problem is, how do we create, like he said, those metrics? You know, how do we catalog a list of metrics to be able to identify the biases in that? So one of the things that I think collaborating right now could do is building these open source foundations, which there's an Overweb Foundation to keep this also in mind, and there's other Black-led foundations going into technology now to build open source tools and things. And this has to be a part of their agenda, because as we get people to use the next level of technology, we have to be able to hold a stake in how much open source we're participating in.
Yeah, I think that is a really important point, in that segues well into Rhea R-H-E-A Dunn's question. Basically, it's talking about power structures, and Anton brought up some really great points about the solution and being able to build those solutions, but we live in a society that has a certain power structure, and has certain people who have the power and have their agenda, which may not necessarily align with our interests. So you talk about, there needs to be Black open source foundations, essentially another seat of power that can actually support or address our interests. So how do you actually see this this kind of struggle unfolding because, currently as we speak, we have, AI being used for warfare. We have AI being used, as you mentioned, sort of in the attention economy to um, kind of suck our souls into our screens. And that's all being very well funded and sort of the wheels are kind of already turning in that direction. So how do you kind of see your role? How do you see that reversing, and how do you see sort of what your role or AI engineers, technologists' role in that would be, if you really think about it as a struggle?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I'll just, get to the point. I think that you can't solve issues until you solve them without judging people. And a lot of the problem in the Black community specifically is people become college educated, they become institutionalized, which is great, but then they separate themselves from the rest of the Black community in a way that's like, I'm a part of the upperclassmen, right? I'm gonna be frank with you. I ain't got no college degree. I was, when I went to college, I had a 3-year-old son. Okay, I had to get GD, and I had quit selling drugs. Okay, and I'm from Atlantic City, so I was like coming from the trenches, trying to get out of the streets and not be a broke college student. So I had to apply my learning into what my mom put me on to, which was STEM education, and all that deep root that my mom planted, that seed that she planted, helped me find a mentor to get acclimated into big data, and it was a wrap from there. So I, as a person that was street smart, saw an opportunity the same way people see opportunity in entertainment and music or in sports. I was like, wow, if I know how to do this work, I can build my career. And I was fortunate to do it through contracting. But in the real world, most people need to get a 6-figure job. So my whole thing is, let's create more 6-figure jobs than 100 millionaire. Because when you bring a whole community up that experiences salary increase at that level, they'll, through group economics, bring the power back. And then, like I said, even with me launching my own institution, I woke up one day and say, during COVID, I launched Wiyasay Research. Actually, during COVID, all the work I'm doing right now happened during COVID. And I am basically going to share with you, to be frank, I woke up and I was thinking about what kind of institution can I launch? I actually started with a venture capital fund that I still have right now. I manage a fund right now to invest in startups and called through Wiyasay Capital, which is our investment arm. But I was like, that's not enough. I can't throw money at this problem because I know that's not, you'll run dry. So now I'm like, the only thing outside of a bank is a research institution. And I started thinking about, wow, how many research institutions are there in America that are led by minorities? There's actually quite a lot, but they do traditional academic research. They do nuclear engineering. They do other types of research. So in software and R&D, I really felt that, like, hey, look, the best way to look at, creating an institution was to start with the problems in our community. Most of our wealth is locked up in nonprofits. When you look at the average community, their local wealth is in their local church. Their local wealth is in their local small businesses. So those are the institutions on a local level, right? But how do those people speak to public dollars, right? So without getting into the details, you can't really reverse something that happens in life. You got to just move forward. So I believe in moving forward. One of the biggest things we can do is understand that natural disaster is a big business, and social impact can be a big business. The pandemic for a lot of startups was a big business. I mean, I'll give you one statistic. The average seed round in America right now is actually $4 million. The average Series A round in America is $16 million. People have raised more money during the pandemic than pre-pandemic. So if you understand that, you can literally correlate problems in the real world that are social issues and then drive value to these problems and make a business out of it. And that's why a lot of nonprofit leaders are becoming social enterprises or benefit corporations. And that's what Wiase set up as, is as a social enterprise. So I believe the next frontier is, and I think David has done this with his own company, is create a social enterprise, right? And build social enterprises that work with the world. And one of our clients at Wiase is actually Broccoli City, which I'm pretty sure some of y'all have heard of, a big festival in DC. We're helping them go through digital transformation right now. So we have different network effects and resources and access. But like I said, you got to start with local institutions where the wealth exists and bring them to the next level, which may look like they're, not today, basically, so I'll stop there.
Broccoli City actually sold to Live Nation, and like that's the thing we always got to do. I've never sold my business. I generate in DC about the same or more in millions of dollars, and I give more jobs, me myself, I give more jobs to I create more opportunity in DC, Washington DC, for people of that lower income than Broccoli City does, right? But a guy like me, because I'm doing 3,000 cap events at Echo Stage, it's harder. The problem is it's harder for guys like me to get capital. It's harder for us to get. That's the problem here. The problem is that some kid in that, whatever, LA, whatever, his dad or whatever has access to a fund. He has an idea, and it's easier for him, and he's not in my ethnic group, to get access to money to kick his idea off the ground, right? But a guy like me, it's harder for me to get access to capital. Like, I'm doing a live streaming event with Cardi B, and I'm doing one with NBA YoungBoy, and I'm, like, I have to raise capital, and it's harder. It's harder for us as technologists to raise money to do our ideas, to be owners, to be founders, and to be people like this, right? And it's difficult for Black guys, right? It's difficult for people coming from our community to do this, right? I work for a startup, but if I wanted to start my own company, like, my boss literally got us his startup founded with this like demo, right? And we got a seed around $3 million. But like, I actually, I did the PCB design, I did all that, but like, it's harder for me to raise money. And that's the thing. And like, we speak about reparation and we talk about that. And sometimes, like, I think about this, and my grandfather was an economist for the government, Lodrick Valentine. And I read the Adam Smith Wealth of a Nation, Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham, and things like that. And we know that technology raises the GDP, right? And we know that technology helps an economy thrive, right? But the microeconomy and of the people that are disproportionately affected by technology, we are not. We have to increase the technology within our community for our economy to grow, right? Based on modern economic principles, right? And nobody has addressed this thing yet, right? And there's two things, like Joshua was saying, like, he was young, he had to sell drugs, had to be around a thing. Similar thing for me. I was young in the community, I wanted things. I got a CD burner, I was on internet relay chat, IRC chat rooms, downloading CDs, I had a Tower CD burner. I'm out here selling CDs at school. I made a clear decision. Like, I was an athlete as well, state champion, track 400 meters, but I went to University of Maryland. I left school as a junior in engineering to start a business doing concerts for 10 years in DC. I went back, got my degree, computer science and mathematics. And that's the route we have to go. It's a hard route. Data was what saved me. Using data, owning that database, and that whole process, right? How can we shortcut that? How can we, a Black kid doesn't have to leave school anymore. He can start his business and get up in a startup office. Like, even right now, like, I'm doing this thing. Like, how do we raise funds? Is the government going to help us? Who's going to help us? Like, where is this money going to come from? Because we need capital. That's what it is. Capital is the oil to the engine here, is the gas to the car. Where is this capital going to come from? How are these kids, if a kid builds a new Arduino sensor that can detect blood and solve diabetes, he's going to have to go sell his idea to somebody that doesn't look like him, right? And he's going to have to give it up. So that's part. I think that's more than a bias. We have to sell our technology because we don't have capital. So which is the bigger problem here,
Yeah, no, I mean, just to kind of speak to that, you're right about a lot of that. I don't know the clarity of the Live Nation deal. I mean, that's beyond me. But what I will say is that part of working together, which I don't have the answer to accessing the capital, but unlocking capital was something that I was able to do when I got into Bitcoin in 2012. And basically, my point is that there's right now essentially a way for us to create special purpose vehicles and other types of investment instruments for one-off projects. But I believe a lot of the problem in terms of technical innovation is that is very capital intensive, right? Depending on what you're doing. And then there's things that are capital light. So it's really identifying for us, how can we unlock capital? Well, if I can unlock, let's say, for instance, you have a SaaS model, like a software as a service model, and you can unlock, revenue, that's one way. A second way is through this this agreement that just was created called a CAFE, which I put David onto. It's a continuous agreement for future equity, and it allows you to put an investment button on your website, and it's a modified safe. There's a few different vehicles like crowdfunding, but I believe the one thing that we're all missing on is that we are not leveraging real estate enough. And that's really, I think, where a lot of the wealth exists in our community, for the credit lines, the other types of funding that's accessible, built in equity. Because when you look at a lot of these institutions, they're actually leveraging most of their holdings in real estate. And they're able to create liquidity on demand because they have holdings and assets to put up as collateral. So a lot of the young people coming up with ideas, including ourselves, even my first idea that got sold, I really got, took out of a situation I could probably made way more money than. And because I didn't have money at the time, I'm like, I need to sell this idea. Because I'm like, this is my first exit. I need to get the check, forget the idea. And then I realized that was the stupidest mistake I ever made. So now it's like, how do we create resources where we can essentially create liquidity? And that's where I feel like there's a lot of liquidity in the Black and brown community right now, but we haven't structured it in a way where we have our own institutions that could provide us that liquidity without it being high risk to them. Like, you go to certain banks, like a Black bank, and say, hey, I have a startup. They can be like, well, no, we don't want, we're good. That's too high risk for us. You go to Silicon Valley Bank or First Republic, they'll open you an account online. You don't got to see a branch. So it's really, like I said, going back to the point of like some of the things you were talking about, I think there's a way for us to do collaborative projects and see where we can use existing liquidity to fund success. And I believe that if the success is tied to an end product and not just to a project like an event, but actual, like you said, innovation, there's some revenue there that can sustain that business.
So I just wanted to give a little insight on the project I was working on. What I'm essentially doing is live streaming technology that uses like the Mandalorian style thing to propagate these shows, and essentially what's the problem was that with the Dua Lipa, she did a live stream. And I don't want to talk, I want to go back to AI, but Dua Lipa did a live stream. Billie Eilish did one. BTS did one. They were the most successful, 700,000 live stream. But they packaged the company like a technology company, right? A streaming company, right? Versus an event. And that's kind of like the goal, not event, but more like a streaming subscription model, because that's where they rape us. They rape these communities. Think, oh, one event, it's an event. It's not a tech company, right? So the goal is to try to make these things tech companies, because it's just like music. Oh, he's just a rapper, but he's not a record label. Atlantic's a record label. Universal is. They're gonna collect the money, get all our checks and things like that. So that's one of my goals, using technologies to change that model, where we're not only the content creators but the content owners. Because just like you said, real estate is something that could get you assets. Also, IP is in perpetuity. You're gonna get paid all the time, just like your real estate pays you, and you get, it's an asset in perpetuity. So it's content ownership. You know what I'm saying? So like changing that model of content ownership when it comes to creating talent, and with creating content, and artists creating content, having that asset belonging to the company and in perpetuity, being able to have replays or being able to generate residual income off that, versus selling it to somebody and giving up the masters and the money or whatever, the content, right? And things like that. And how AI is going to help me with this is that I'm using artificial intelligence to reduce the computational cost of generating AR and VR images, because the GPU is very expensive when you render these images. So when you're using AI to assist in rendering and these environments, they serve as a tool to allow people like me, who might not have, all the financial resources for a Mandalorian style like production, but AI can help me do that and bring me closer to that level, right?
Yeah, I really like how you tied that.
Hold on. Can you put yourself on mute, please? Somebody's like background noise going on. All right, thanks. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I love the point that you made at the end is in terms of how will AI assist in what we're talking about, because it sounds like we landed on the issue is kind of like unlocking capital and being able to have liquidity so that these ideas can continue to serve our communities over time. So I just would love to know what else, how else do you think AI can help us unlock that capital? You were talking about how you feel like the capital is in nonprofits and small business and in real estate. How do you see AI potentially helping us either put together those pieces and find insight and do better decision making around that, or improve processes, kind of like what Anton was saying, and bring costs down to be able to do that as
So,
well?
I'll give you a tangible example real quick. John Henry, who used to be at Harlem Capital, is now launching a startup that he announced publicly that's around auto insurance, and it uses mobile devices to track people in real time to avoid their mileage or whatever they're doing on the road. But he's promoting AI in that offering, but he's also democratizing auto insurance. When you look at the insurance industry, the credit industry, when you look at banking and finance, everything is already built on automation, right? And there's already extreme bias in this in terms of prediction on if a person is credit worthy or not to borrow for a mortgage. I mean, fintech is one of the biggest areas for AI application, right? The flip side of this is where there's peer-to-peer applications. Let me ask you a better question. Is there a Geico for Africa? And that's where the opportunity is. That the opportunity is in emerging markets and rebuilding these institutions over there, but letting them be owned by local communities. And the communities won't necessarily govern their money, but they'll rely on the systems being built to support their needs for insurance. And that's I think something we're spoiled in America. We have insurance, and we have other things that we rely on that are basically things that we're gonna have to probably abandon in the future, like the idea of cash. Like Africans predominantly outside of the mobile stuff I'm talking about, they rely on cash. They don't use a bunch of credit cards. I mean, they have them, but they don't really rely on that stuff, right? So when you look at now Amazon launching stores locally for Amazon Go stores, where you can have like a cashless store and just go in, have an Amazon Prime account and just be done. That right there will be an example of where the world's going. But it's on us to understand that the new credit score is not just about if you didn't pay back a debt. It's also about your social character. And China right now has already implemented that in real life, where if you let your dog poop on the sidewalk and don't pick it up, they penalize you for that with their facial recognition technology in China. And that's what they're doing with surveillance. So at the end of the day, I think, not to go on a tangent here, my point is that, building systems for peer-to-peer marketplaces is where the money is at. And then looking at ways to create what they're now calling venture capital super apps. That means apps where people rely on everything. Like you look at Uber, it used to be for ride sharing, now it's for ordering food. You can use it for logistics. You use it for work. There's Uber for work, right? Airbnb, you can go stay at a place, also do an online experience. That's going to become the social norm. We're using these, all-in-one applications to support our lives. And with that, it's going to transition into how are we banking or funding this stuff? Because right now, for instance, Apple has a partnership with Goldman Sachs, and then that's how the Apple Card is created. Okay? Google is launching a checking account. So mobile payments, okay, is a massive space that's becoming more of a rat race to actually control consumer spending and what consumers use and tracking their spending habits. Because basically, Gen Z is highly uncategorized yet. Baby boomers have been categorized through market research, and maybe Gen X, but millennials and Gen Z are still a question mark to the large, big retail giants, and also to other people that are in mortgage and banking. So They're trying to look at, okay, how do we go after the underbanked or the unbanked, and then also support our existing customer base, and then integrate these systems with the consumer. So I'll just say that we have to build more peer-to-peer systems where AI can play the same role, but instead of it predicting someone's ability to pay a debt off, it's predicting someone's ability to improve their credit. That's something that like Credit Karma does right now. But they use your information and sell it to credit cards to then recommend you what credit cards are most likely to get you approved. And every time you apply, they're doing a hard inquiry on your credit. So they're not really solving a problem. You see what I'm saying? Like Credit Karma will give you the information, let you fill out the details, give you credit cards, you apply for a bunch of them, and you can still get denied. And all those hard inquiries still affect your credit. So AI being used in that scenario will be like, don't apply for this credit card because you're not gonna get approved, and it's gonna affect your credit. That's an area where there's a inefficiency. So I'll stop there because I kind of went a little deep. So
Yo, I just wanted to say one thing, right? With AI, like,
Yeah, please.
they use AI and they use these automated systems to hurt underrepresented communities, incarcerate them, deny them credit, and things like that. Can we use AI to undo these things? For example, in Washington, D.C., if you get arrested and not convicted, they call it no paper. You have to wait 5 to 7 years for this thing to be taken off your record, right? There's a lot of black people in Washington, D.C. that have been arrested but not convicted. Also, for misdemeanors, it takes 5 to 7, almost 10 years and things like that to get it off your record. So not only is gentrification happening, and this was a bill that been in the city council for over 5 years. They haven't moved on it. They painted Black Lives Matter in the street though. But can we use artificial intelligence to help find these people, remove these charges to allow them to get jobs? Because they can't. Not only are their communities being gentrified, but they can't work because they have a criminal charge on their record. I feel like that's a great use of AI, right? Great use of AI, right? And what about these credit derogatory remarks that are placed on kids because they auntie or they mom put a credit application in their name? Now they can't even qualify for a student loan, right? Or they can't get clearance because they look at your credit, right? So their lives are impacted, right? The AI is going to say, no, 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 no. This person can't buy a car. So now they can't get to work. Like, these are the things that affected us, right? So how can we undo these wrongs, maybe caused by our own people sometimes, right? I think AI can help us. Like, oh, I observed this behavior where the IP, it looks like this mom or this auntie took this child's social security, applied for an apartment. Now this kid has $10,000, $5,000 in, debt. Can we, hey, flag, AI flag, let's remove this from them. Hey, this guy has a conviction, a charge, on his record, but he was not convicted. Let's remove this. Let's be proactive, because there's no system in place to do it. There's not even an automated system, but they got AI to lock these guys up, find these targets, facial recognition these guys, put them in jail. You know what I'm saying? And some people are rolling back these systems. But what about counter systems, right? It's like the cybersecurity thing, the boogeyman, right? Oh, China, we're so scared, which we should be. We should be scared of them about AI. They hacked our election, right? And like with AI, this is my thing. Like we have these counterintelligence mechanisms for hacking, right? White hat, black hat, gray hat, right? But with AI, right? Do we have that? No, we're just scared of the boogeyman, right? The boogeyman, the big AI boogeyman's coming to get us. Are we training counterintelligence, counter AI, like offensive and defensive AI? Are we doing that? Are we design? Where's that conversation happening? I'm trying to be in that one too. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of sitting here and being like cyber back in the 90s, right? While I was in IRC trying to be a hacker, everybody was scared of the boogeyman, right? Oh, the boogeyman's coming. Oh, you need cyber security and firewalls. Oh my, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like, what is the protective? Is it policy, or are we gonna develop AI systems to counter these things that we're scared of? right? So that's my
Yeah, that was beautiful. I think that was really excellent to end it on. Like it's a tool. It can definitely be used for things that we might not prefer, but it can be used for counteracting those sort of negative consequences too. So yeah, that's a really powerful perspective. I think we are a little bit over time, so I think that
Yeah,
was good.
Yeah.
And thanks so much, Joshua and Antoine, for joining us in this conversation. I learned a lot.
yeah,
Um,
I definitely got to connect with Anton and you all, both. I want to connect more to learn more about what y'all got going on.
yeah,
How I can
same. I would
asset.
love to stay in connection afterwards. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah. Thank you, Chibu, for moderating. Anton and Joshua, really appreciate all of you and all that you put into your work, as well as showing up here and yeah, just sharing your knowledge. Such a blessing for us to hear you all. We really encourage you all to come on and well to join the challenge, to really actually participate in the challenge part of it and really focus on some aspect of your interest, expertise, endeavor, and think about how it could be improved if there was a hyper-dimensional web. And it's coming, the overweb. We've got a pattern. You just apply that pattern to wherever it is. Is it art? Is it music? Is it travel? You can come up with something really interesting and groundbreaking by just going through this exercise. So once again, check out the Edge Writers Overweb Challenge community space. There's also the Discord of Noetic Nomad, who along with Bridget.io is bringing this event and really pushing this forward, sponsored by the Forbes Funds. And we've got a bunch of different partners, including Edge Writers, UMI, School, Accelerant Solutions, and more. Check them all out on the website. That's theoverweb.com.